You know, before there were empires and nations like we think of them today, your name, well, that was your passport. It was your protection. It was your power. Today on The Explainer, we're going to journey back to ancient Arabia to figure out how a single family tree could literally shape the course of history. We're talking about the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad and how it was built piece by piece, generation by generation.
So, to really get a feel for the world the Prophet Muhammad was born into, we've got to go back to the stories the ancient Arabs told about themselves. And look, these weren't just bedtime stories. No way. This was the very fabric of their identity. It was all woven from legends and oral traditions that explained, where did we come from and who are we?
All right, so here's our game plan for today. First, we'll dive into the mists of time with the earliest Arabs. Then, we're going to follow the two main branches of their family tree. After that, we'll zoom right in on the Prophet's own lineage, look at that fuzzy line between history and legend, and finally, we'll get to the heart of it. Why in this world your ancestors were everything.
Okay, let's jump right in. To even begin to make sense of their deep past, Arab tradition does something pretty smart. It splits their history into two big chunks. You could call them the Age of Myth and the Age of Memory. So first up, you've got the extinct Arabs. Think of ancient civilizations like the Ad and Thamud. These are peoples mentioned in the Quran, known for building these incredible cities and then, poof. After ignoring divine warnings, they just vanished into the sands of time. Now, from the groups that survived all that, we get the remaining Arabs, and they are the source, the wellspring, that all later Arab peoples are said to come from.
But, of course, it's not quite that simple. These remaining Arabs weren't just one big happy family. Nope. They split into two major, legendary branches, and this split, this division, would go on to shape the entire destiny of the Arabian Peninsula for centuries.
Okay, so on one side you have the pure Arabs from the south, the Qahtani. They saw themselves as the OGs, the original speakers of Arabic. Then on the other side, you've got the Arabized Arabs from the north, the Adnani. Their big claim? They descended from Ishmael, the son of Abraham. So yeah, maybe they adopted the language, but their lineage, it connected them straight back to a major prophetic tradition. And this north-south divide, let me tell you, it was a huge source of pride, but also some really intense rivalry.
All right, so now that we've got the big picture, let's zoom way in. We're going to focus on one single branch of this massive family tree, the one that, well, would change everything. We're talking about the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad. So the Prophet's family tree, it lands squarely in that Arabized Adnani branch from the north. And the key guy, the main link connecting his more recent ancestors to the super distant past, is a man named Adnan. Scholars think he lived around 30 BC, which, to put that in perspective, is just about a generation before Jesus Christ. And here's what's really amazing. In a world of, shifting sands and histories passed down by word of mouth, there's this incredible agreement on this one point. Genealogists, both back then and today, are unanimous. There are exactly 20 generations between the Prophet Muhammad and this ancestor, Adnan. This part of the family tree, it's considered totally rock solid.
Okay, but what happens when you try to go even further back? How reliable is all of this? Well, the genealogists themselves actually break it down for us. They have 3 different levels of certainty, basically, separating the hard facts from folklore and from pure myth. And this is where it gets really fascinating. The first tier, from the Prophet back those 20 generations to Adnan, that's considered set in stone, historical fact. The second tier, going from Adnan back to Ishmael, well, that's where things get murky. It's debated folklore. You've got different pre-Islamic traditions saying it could be anywhere from 7 generations to over 40. And then the third tier, the final leg of the journey, from Ishmael all the way back to Adam, that doesn't even come from Arab tradition. It's actually sourced from the Old Testament, kind of building a bridge to connect their lineage to the very beginning of humanity.
And look, it's not just us today being skeptical about going back that far. This idea is echoed right there in early Islamic tradition. There's a famous saying, attributed to the Prophet himself, that's basically a warning. When genealogists try to trace a line too far back into the mists of time, they have lied. It's like an admission that, hey, some things are just lost to history, beyond what we can ever truly know.
So this brings up a huge question, right? With all these fuzzy details and uncertainties, why was tracking your family tree so unbelievably important in pre-Islamic Arabia? I mean, what was really at stake here?
Well, it all boils down to one powerful word, sharaf.
Think of it as honor, nobility, your reputation. It's like your social currency and your political capital all rolled into one. In a tribal society that was absolutely obsessed with status, your show-off was everything, seriously. It determined who you could marry, who'd do business with you, and who would have your back in a fight.
But here's the catch. This prestige wasn't just handed down to you. It wasn't automatic. It had to be forged, earned, and built upon, generation after generation. And the Prophet's ancestors? They were absolute master architects of their family's honor. Each one added another crucial layer to this growing legacy.
You can really see it start to take off with guys like Qusay around the year 400 CE. He was the political mastermind, the unifier. He's the one who wrestled control of Mecca back for his tribe, the Quraysh, and basically set them up as the dominant political force in the city. Then, a few generations down the line, you get his descendant, Hashim. He was the economic architect. This guy had the brilliant idea to set up two massive annual trade caravans. One went north towards Roman lands in the summer, the other went south to Yemen in the winter. This simple idea completely plugged Mecca into the global economy and brought in just immense wealth and influence.
And all of this really comes to a head with the Prophet's own grandfather, Abd al-Muttalib. He was the leader who embodied all that prestige. We're talking about a man of incredible stature, the one credited with rediscovering the sacred well of Zamzam, and who famously stood up to Abraha's invading army in what became known as the Year of the Elephant.
So you see the pattern here, right? This wasn't just a string of lucky breaks. It was a deliberate, conscious effort. Qusay laid down the political foundation. Hashim built the economic engine on top of it. And then Abd al-Muttalib crowned the whole thing with spiritual and civic leadership. And what was the result of all this strategic family building? Well, it meant that the Prophet Muhammad was born into arguably the most noble and respected family in all of Arabia. And that's not a small thing. It gave him an instant platform, a foundation of respect and authority, and it created this perception that his family was maybe even divinely favored, which would be absolutely crucial for the message he was about to bring to the world. And that famous quote from Abd al-Muttalib when he's talking to the invading general Abraha, it just perfectly captures that mix of faith and real-world leadership that defined his family. He's basically saying, hey, the Holy House has its own protector, but these camels, they're my responsibility. He trusted in a higher power for sure, but he never forgot his practical duty to protect his people's livelihood.
And in the end, this whole story of an ancient lineage, it's about more than just one family, isn't it? It's really about the power of the stories we tell. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? How do the stories we tell about our own ancestors, that mix of solid fact, family legend, and maybe a little myth, how do they shape who we believe we are today?